Where does the water flowing in a local creek come from? This video, produced by the nonprofit HydroFathom, explores this question. HydroFathom operates our organization in San Luis Obispo, California. Luckily for a nonprofit focused on watersheds, we have a watershed that runs right through our very town. In fact, every drop of rain that falls in the city of San Luis Obispo funnels to one point, San Luis Obispo Creek. Being a coastal city, this 18-mile-long creek drains directly to the Pacific Ocean at a place called Avila Beach. HydroFathom uses our local watershed to study the nature of watersheds and to educate people about water. This video, part of our 2023 Watershed series, explores the San Luis Obispo Creek watershed. Here atop High School Hill in San Luis Obispo, we see contours of the San Luis Obispo Creek watershed. A watershed simply funnels rain or melting snow that falls on land towards one place. Watersheds cover a limited amount of land and funnel all precipitation to one point. Here we see the watershed of the San Luis Obispo Creek on a map and a sketch of the shape. It covers about 95 square miles overall. Anytime that rain falls on any of this land, it runs into San Luis Obispo Creek, and 1 inch of rain across the entire watershed would generate an astounding 1.7 billion gallons of water. In the unlikely event that snow fell here, then water from the melting snow would also run into the creek. The San Luis Obispo Creek watershed contains many branches, smaller creeks that lead into the main creek. This adds many miles to the water flows of the creek. In this video, we purposely delve into the extents of the San Luis Obispo Creek, looking to learn where the water in the creek comes from and where it goes. In this exploration, we will visit the entire length of the main creek and many of the subfeeders of this creek. Watch this video and you will likely learn something that you will remember the next time that you visit the bank of a river, stream, or creek. To go see the start of the creek, we will need to go up high. Water does not run directionally, like from north to south, but vertically from high to low, essentially sliding down the land lower and lower as water travels. So when we explore watersheds, we seek high ground first. Remember, elevation is expressed as above sea level because all dry land lies higher than the ocean. Water flows from high elevations to lower elevations. Thus, we will head to a high point of the watershed. Here along the 101 freeway at a place called Cuesta Grade, we reach a high point. Here 2 watersheds meet, the San Luis Obispo Creek and the Salinas River watersheds. Rain that falls in front of this sign flows into the San Luis Obispo Creek and onto the ocean in about 18 miles, and rain that falls behind the sign flows onto the Salinas River and reaches the ocean 150 miles north near Monterey Bay. The water in this creek mainly springs from rock contained in the local hills. When hiking in local hills, one can spot slight seepage from rocks. At the bottom of High School Hill, after no rain for several months, water still flows along after spring from local rock. Hundreds of these seeps all along the watershed combine to make water flow in the creek. Here our founder, Todd York, explains the concept of a watershed using a leaf.
So what we're going to see with this watershed is a collection of just small streams and creeks that join up to make a larger creek called San Luis Obispo Creek. And a leaf is a good example of that. If you can imagine each one of these veins that are in this leaf, they run to bigger veins. And then those veins collect into a single vein, which has an inlet in this case, but we'll look at as an outlet in the case of the creek. This is, in our example, we just went up to Cuesta Grade. And this is Cuesta Grade. Down here is where we'll be heading for once everything collects and goes to one path. We'll be at Avila Beach.
Now, we continue along the main creek and reach a place called Niasi Open Space. Here the first trickles of seepage gather into a creek. Immediately, the natural flow of the creek becomes influenced by humans. Todd York discusses.
So what we're in search of out here is water in the wild. We're going to spend all of 2023 going through watersheds. Even though we have a mandate to look at watersheds and also infrastructure and aquifers, This first video is going to be about watersheds. California has a mechanized water supply that controls the flow of 40 million acre feet of water every year. It's a tremendous amount. This is a dry state, wet state, and that's why it's good to examine. We're in the dry period, and you can see the drastic difference between the dry period and the wet period. And that allows you during one period to see the high flow and the aggressive action of nature with water, and during the low flow to get up close and see the creek and really examine it. And one thing we'll see is the human influence here. I just walked through something built by Caltrans. Caltrans is a tremendous influence on this creek and all water supply, natural watersheds in California, because so many of their roads go right next to the creeks. It's just natural pathway, or rivers, just natural pathways for the road to be made next to. You go up on the bank a little higher, the pathway's already there, formed by the river, and you just start carving into the bank and you make a road. Here, with the water in the wild, we'll see natural plants, sycamore, oak, things like that, and chaparral. And later on, when we move into the city, we'll see what I call the ornamental plants. The other thing about California is we do rely on a mechanization of water because we're a sprinkler state. When it gets dry, we don't quit growing our plants, we just sprinkle. And we store water and we spray it on the ground at our will. And that's not the way, and you'll hear me constantly on these videos reference the Native Americans. The reason I reference the Native Americans is because they lived naturally. And you can see right here, this creek is not so natural anymore.
Still further down the hill, we reach Cuesta Park, where the creek flows right through a local park still struggling to find the natural path. Obstructions like old cattle dams linger long after the old owners have passed. At the end of the park, we discover that the creek must lumber under the highway once more, for the second time in less than a mile. We will follow the flow of the creek in that direction again, but now we go to look at two feeder streams that flow into San Luis Obispo Creek, the Reservoir Canyon Branch, and Stenner Creek. These next two feeder streams will help illustrate how water collects starting at higher levels. Reservoir Canyon forms a branch of the main creek. Again, we climb up an elevation to find the start of the flow, the headwaters. These stream drains water that falls or springs between the mountains behind San Luis Obispo and High School Hill. The shape of the land funnels the water in this area to one spot, which we will soon see. We will just take a quick peek at two of our favorite spots in the canyon. The first being a tree that actually grows in the creek bed. When heavy rains cause flooding, water crashes into this tree and indeed has hollowed out the tree. Despite being hollow, the tree still lives, growing branches despite only being a shell. This tree thrived so much that the tree next to it needed to grow virtually vertically for several yards to reach sunlight. Near the bottom of the canyon, shortly before the stream joins the main creek, the total flow from the canyon can be observed from this bridge, one of many we will cross. Here at this small waterfall, the flow becomes apparent. Remember, no rain has fallen here for months, so likely most of this water springs from the local hills. The clearness of the water also indicates springs as the likely source. This water flows year-round, making this creek a prime water source prior to modern water systems. Here we see a pipe that helps give this canyon its name. In the early 1900s, simple dams were constructed with pipes sticking through the dam. The water pooled and pressurized the pipe, allowing the water to be routed into town about 3 miles away. So we follow our proven strategy at Stenner Creek, taking the path higher, past an old barn and across some railroad tracks. At height, we can look back and see the land being drained by Stenner Creek. When rain falls here, some reaches San Luis Obispo Creek. The main hiking path eventually crosses the first sign of Stenner Creek. The top of the creek is somewhat flat, and water stands here in the sun, allowing algae to grow. Here again, we also see an old dam, this time with 2 pipes embedded, likely for 2 different farms or ranches, or the pipes might lead to ponds like this. Again, near the bottom of a canyon, we can gauge the amount of water flowing from this area. We can also see an accumulation of algae that flows down from above, but then slows down and stops once the land flattens. Stenner Creek joins San Luis Obispo Creek, just below downtown San Luis Obispo where we head now. Over thousands of years, the San Luis Obispo Creek served as a natural water source for life on the central coast of California. This creek naturally supported the local Native American tribes, the Chumash, who lived from Ventura to Monterey, surviving in groups along small creeks all along the Pacific coast. Here downtown, we will see the creek begin to merge with the city. In fact, in this location, the city completely dominates and absorbs the creek, which actually flows under the city. Here on the other side of the block, the creek disappears, becoming a subterranean urban flow. A few blocks away, it again emerges under a restaurant named Luna Red, near the Mission. This creek supports life forms of all kinds, including insects, birds, mammals, plants, and aquatic life. The 2 most well-known, perhaps, are the steelhead trout and the Pacific tree frog, whose chorus we hear in this clip.
So here in the Mission Plaza, I found that telltale sign that water is nearby. And guess what? It's not this fountain, but it's the building behind it, the Mission. If you're along the Mission Trail in California, between San Diego and Monterey, all of the missions are built near water. And the Mission has sponsored this to show what was here when they arrived. It's the Chumash and the bear and the steelhead trout. And without really mentioning that the presence of the Europeans would lead to pretty much the obliteration of all 3 of these things.
Past the Mission, the water flows under Broad Street. The yearly high water mark of the creek reaches about 5 feet up those trees in the creek. We move past a dining court called the Creamery, and then meet up with the creek at this bridge in the business park near Marsh Street, where the creek leaves downtown by traveling under an off-ramp of the highway. In about 1/2 mile, the creek enters the Bob Jones trailhead in the city. This trail parallels the creek for a few miles on the way to the ocean. This water will quickly reach the ocean. Most water in this creek only spends a few days in the creek due to the proximity to the ocean and the speed of the flow. You can see the negative influences of humans along the city's stretch on the trail. On the trail, there also stands the local sewage treatment plant, which discharges treated water to the creek. In this section, the creek begins to form wetlands since the land lies much lower. These marshes serve as sanctuary for fish and numerous waterfowl species. Before the creek leaves the city, another creek named Prefamo Creek joins the flow. This creek forms a small lake, Laguna Lake, which historically naturally supported large fish populations. These fish attracted bears, and the Spanish named this valley Los Osos Valley, Valley of the Bears. The creek flows into the main creek after passing under the highway. Now, the color of the San Luis Obispo Creek has changed after a 5-mile trip through an urban environment. About 3 miles before the creek ends, Local citizens have formed a land conservancy where floodwaters can pool. Apple trees can withstand periodic flooding, so the land both serves agricultural and environmental purposes while controlling flooding. Our San Luis Obispo Creek wet season video covers flooding in this area extensively. A parking lot for the trail lays near the highway, slightly more than 2 miles away from the ocean. The county has paved the trail, providing a smooth path for bikers, hikers, and runners. The path also serves a few commercial interests. Magnificent oaks stand here well over 100 years old. Creekside oaks have received water from this creek their entire lives, but the flow varies with long dry months in the summer and fall. This staggered water intake morphs the oak's shape. The trees have the ability to fracture the local rock shale while seeking water and stability. Even towards the end of the creek, feeders join, this one being Sea Canyon Creek. We get a peek of the creek's total flow under this road bridge. Before a creek meets the ocean, it becomes an estuary, serving as a refuge for plants and animals that favor the brackish water found here. Humans disrupt the natural flow of the creek, and to compensate, they build things like fish ladders which help the trout reach their spawning beds. On this trail bridge, we get a good view of the final stretches of the creek where the ocean starts to influence the flow. Here, right before the beach, one of the last feeders joins the creek, supplying a small coastal flow. Finally, the San Luis Obispo Creek reaches the ocean where we can see a flow that has lasted eons, steadily flowing year after year. The water returns to its origin, Mother Ocean. The renewed water left the ocean and then became soiled while returning. This water not so much returns as snaps back, the waters of the earth all being one. In this location, you can contemplate the thousands of generations of steelhead trout that have found their way to this mouth where they traveled up the creek to spawn a new generation. One might also consider the Chumash tribe that lived off the humble yields of this creek for over 100 generations, gathering acorns, trout, and clams while living among bear, mountain lion, coyote, and bobcat. Water is life. HydroFathom says, there is no dry life. One small watershed, covering a tiny patch of the earth, can sustain life in abundance. The waters of the San Luis Obispo Creek feed oak, sycamore, trout, people, frogs, insects, skunks, raccoons, squirrels, and so much more. Think, when you stand at this junction, thousands of years prior to your birth, all this existed. Dozens of such places stand along the California coast alone. Traditionally, our researchers place a stick at the mouth of any watershed where it meets the ocean. Here at Avila Beach stands the stick for the San Luis Obispo Creek.